Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. I want to come before you today to talk about Nevada's residential eviction moratorium. As many of you know, we originally implemented an evictions moratorium early on in the COVID-19 pandemic in an effort to help everyone be able to stay home for Nevada and slow the spread of COVID-19. Throughout the pandemic, this moratorium has been extended as the situation with COVID-19 evolved. And over the last year, the state has partnered with counties to set up rental assistance programs and work with the judiciary and the legislature to create a rental mediation program. Much progress has been made, but there is still more work to be done. Our state is currently going through a large-scale transition period as we continue to navigate the ever-evolving pandemic and subsequent crises. Kids are back in school. We're in the process of transitioning mitigation authority to local governments, and people are heading back to their workplaces. The transition process for each of these areas has been strategic, and Nevada's housing situation is no different. We must transition out of our eviction moratorium, but do so in a way that protects tenants and landlords to the greatest extent possible. That is why today I am announcing that I will be issuing an emergency directive that extends the current state eviction moratorium for 2 more months. At the end of May, the state moratorium will come to an end and will not be extended again. Today's extension comes with one additional requirement. When landlords provide notices to tenants during this time period, they must, repeat, they must also include information on on available rental assistance programs and how tenants can access them. Help is available for those in need, but only if they know about it. I have also asked stakeholders across the state to increase efforts to inform the public on available rental assistance to ensure Nevadans can stay in their homes and landlords can get the money they are owed. As many of you know, yesterday the CDC issued an extension on the federal eviction moratorium for 90 days. The CDC order, out of necessity, is broad and applies nationwide. In reality, however, every state's eviction laws are different, with different eviction notices and different court procedures. That's why our state eviction moratorium is so important during this transition period. It will continue to provide clear direction to courts, eliminating much of the confusion and burden on judicial resources, and it will help keep eligible tenants housed. Additionally, this 2-month extension of the state eviction moratorium will allow much needed time for stakeholders throughout the state to ensure processes are developed and programs are set up to be implemented effectively. Thanks to President Biden and a majority of members from our federal delegation, the state is receiving millions in rental assistance from the American Rescue Plan, on top of funding already received. But this money must get out the door faster. We don't want to send federal money set aside specifically for rental assistance back to Washington, D.C. This money belongs in Nevada. By extending this moratorium, my expectation is that all stakeholders will work together to ensure systems are created to get these dollars out the door faster to help both landlords and tenants. It does not make sense to put thousands of tenants at risk of eviction when rental assistance dollars are available, especially when we know that massive evictions will cause public health concerns and irreparable harm to Nevada families still struggling from the pandemic. And the reality is landlords are struggling too. They deserve to be paid for the last year, and the money is there to make them whole. I've asked all partners throughout the state to do everything we can to get it to them. Originally, I did not plan on extending this moratorium today, but I'm not going to put thousands of Nevadans at risk of losing their homes while funding exists to help them and the landlords. By the end of this 2 months, I expect that plans are developed and implemented to get rental assistance into the hands of landlords to keep tenants in their homes. Additionally, this extension will allow more time for Nevadans to get vaccinated and for our economy to continue to recover, which will help our housing crisis as well. Now more than ever, there is hope on the horizon for the end of this pandemic. Our cases, hospitalizations, and positivity rates are continuing to drop because Nevadans have come together under the collective goal to slow the spread of this deadly virus. We're administering vaccine as fast as our federal allocation allows us. We are closer to the end than to beginning, but there is still a lot of work ahead. And it's because of you we're doing so well. Again, at the end of May, the eviction moratorium for the state of Nevada will end, while the CDC protections will stay in place for another 30 days. During that 30-day period, eviction case filings may resume in the courts, but renters will still be protected from actual eviction through the end of the CDC moratorium. In a moment, you're going to hear from some of the stakeholders we have been working with, including Kevin Schiller from Clark County. We have worked collaboratively with Clark County, where 72% of all state evictions are handled in one court. For example, Clark County is working on a process to pre-qualify tenants and landlords for rental assistance, so by the time of the mediation or court hearing, timely payments of rental assistance can resolve the case. But more importantly, if the landlords are being paid now during this pause, evictions will be avoided. I've also invited Shannon Chambers from Home Means Nevada, who will share more information on plans for the next 2 months. Finally, we will hear from Assembly Speaker Jason Frierson and Senate Majority Leader Nicole Cannizzaro about ongoing work in the Nevada legislature that will align with the 60-day timeline as well. I want to thank them in advance for their work to figure out what can be done legislatively to help both tenants and landlords. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to Shannon Chambers, who will speak briefly and will be followed by Kevin Schiller. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Governor Sisolak. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. And thank you everybody on this call today. My name is Shannon Chambers. I'm the president of Home Means Nevada. I'm also the Nevada Labor Commissioner, so I get a unique perspective on all of these issues. And I want to again thank the governor and his staff for dedicating the resources and developing solutions on these issues. In October of 2020, Home Means Nevada became responsible for the rental eviction mediation program that was created through the last special session of the Nevada legislature. We deployed that program very rapidly and very quickly and established a website specifically for the program called the Renter Connect. This is a website that has a vast amount of resources for tenants, landlords, attorneys, for the courts, for the mediators, to provide information on rental assistance, legal aid, various different issues, CDC declarations, the tenant declarations required under the moratorium. As the rental eviction mediation program became deployed, we worked with the courts, mainly with the Las Vegas Justice Court, but with all the courts in the state of Nevada to implement that program effectively and quickly. So between the period of October 2020 through December of 2020, we processed over 1,300 cases through the rental eviction mediation program. There were many success stories through that program and many tenants that were able to stay in their residence. What we also realized in working with the various partners and the stakeholders was that given the time frame of the eviction notice, from eviction notice to the eviction hearing, we were dealing with a very, very short time frame, and the ability to get tenants prioritized for rental assistance or for landlords to get prioritized to obtain rental assistance was a challenge. So Home Means Nevada worked with the courts, the Nevada Supreme Court, with the counties, with the governor's office, with the different homeowner organizations, with the rental associations, to try and come up with a plan to make this process much quicker and much more efficient. So in the past 2 months, Home Means Nevada has been working with the other partners to develop a plan that we will implement over the next 60 days. Part of that plan will be to prioritize the cases that are sitting in the court system now. The majority of those cases are in Las Vegas Justice Court and Clark County. So we will be working with them extensively to prioritize those cases, to send those cases that are appropriate for mediation through mediation, for the cases that are not appropriate for mediation, to work with the courts and Clark County to prioritize those cases for rental assistance if they are eligible. So we are all committed to making this plan work over the next 60 days. It has been my opinion as the president of Home Means Nevada that we cannot lose any more time. And so while a moratorium does buy some more time, we have to be effective and efficient in how we process that time and how we work through these issues. So over the next 60 days, Home Means Nevada will be working with the other partners, like I said, the courts, the counties, the local jurisdictions, with the apartment associations, with the landlords, to develop a plan that will prioritize rental assistance applications as they go through the courts or go through mediation. And for those that are somewhere in between, we will implement a voluntary mediation program so that tenants and landlords can sit down with a mediator and potentially work through their issues and come to an agreement. The important point about mediation is that it is free. It is free to the tenant. It is free for the landlord. And it is a very effective process that can produce very effective results. I can tell you from personal experience, having administered the rental eviction mediation program, we heard testimonials from both landlords and tenants that they were so grateful to have the opportunity to sit down with a third party to work through their issues and to be pointed in the right direction of rental assistance and where they needed to go. Again, that's only part of the solution, but it is a big part of the solution that will become another building block for the courts to work through and for the counties to work through, and to make this process, again, a much more efficient and effective process, and to prioritize those cases that do need to prioritize for rental assistance, and to get those decisions in a very quick and timely manner so that cases do not end up in the courts when this latest moratorium ends at the end of May. So again, Home Means Nevada is more than grateful to be part of this and to be tasked with this by the governor's office and by the governor himself. And we look forward to working with all those partners going forward. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Kevin Schiller, who is the Assistant County Manager for Clark County, who will play a very, very big part in implementing this plan. And Mr. Schiller has been very great to work with, and appreciate his time and effort. So go ahead, Mr. Schiller. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shannon. I first want to thank Governor Sisolak and his staff on behalf of Clark County for their continued efforts, especially as we battle this pandemic and face evictions, and both the tenants and the landlords. On that note, with this 60-day extension, I think two pieces that I want to make sure I highlight is we had changes in the rental assistance programming and eligibility requirements that occurred at the end of December going into January with the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. Some of those key tenets is we obviously are extending 60 days and we need people to get applications into the queue. That website is chap.clarkcountynv.gov. Again, chap.clarkcounty.nv.gov. If you are in the queue or if you are not in the queue, either way, you need to go in and update your application. Two main requirements that have occurred is obviously the tenant must apply. It can no longer be applied for by your landlord. If that occurred in your previous process, it needs to be applied for by you at this point. Documentation is a critical component of this for all of you out there that are listening. So you have to do two main pieces. One is proof of income, which will be tied to your tax returns, pay stubs, unemployment insurance payments, so you can prove that. Other piece is landlord documentation tied to your statement of arrears. And then also your landlord will be putting in a W-9 and some of that documentation. Two key pieces that I want to make sure I emphasize to this again is if you are in the queue, you have your spot in line in the queue, and we have continued to process applications while we update those requirements. If you're in that queue and you update those within the next 30 days, you maintain your spot within that. If you are applying as a new applicant, you need to get on there as soon as possible to get that documentation and that completed application. What does the income eligibility mean? So if you are 80% of affordable median income, the translation for you is And I'm just giving the example, a family of 4 could earn up to about $60,000. There's more detail on the website specifically tied to this. And we want to make sure in that documentation that you can provide that one member of your household was impacted by COVID. Another piece that I want to make sure is very clear is we have updated our portal so that that documentation can be uploaded quickly. And then on the landlord side, there will also be an updated portal in about 10 days where you can upload that information from the landlord side. Residency and citizenship, you must be a resident of Clark County. Undocumented individuals are eligible for rental assistance. In follow-up to Ms. Chambers, I want to emphasize we are working with the eviction courts and we currently have data from them specific to evictions that have been filed. If you have received an eviction notice at any level, it is very important that you respond to that eviction while we're working on your application and your process. So I want to put out 2 numbers. One is to Legal Aid of Southern Nevada, 702-386-1070 or 702-671-3976. You need to contact them if you need assistance in regard to your eviction notice and or process. If you are in the eviction queue, we are prioritizing that through work with our partners and Ms. Chambers and Legal Aid. So what we will be doing is reaching out to you, and you may be hearing from us sooner rather than later as we have a list of those currently. To give some sense on timeframes, one of the key pieces is when we ended the initial rental assistance based on the initial federal allocation, there were still 12,000 applications that were sitting in that queue when we started with our next round of federal funding. That is what's currently being utilized. That will serve up to approximately 40,000 households in total, at a total of $161 million in conjunction with the state and local jurisdictions dollars. Again, I want to emphasize if you are in the queue, you must go back to the website and update your information. And if you are listening to this and are in crisis, we need to make sure you go to chat.clarkcountynv.gov and get your information in. With that, I really want to extend a gracious thanks to Governor Sisolak and all the stakeholders in relationship to this, as we really want to get these dollars out over the next 60 days and prioritize those needs. The last piece is if you contact, the other pieces that I want to make sure everybody is aware, we will be working on rehousing. If you apply for assistance and you aren't eligible, we still have you in our queue to work on rehousing.
All right, at this point, we are going to step away from that press conference. But just to recap, you were just listening to some of our local leaders as well as Governor Sisolak before that. And the update, really, the breaking news is Governor Sisolak is now extending the eviction ban here in Nevada by 2 more months. So 1 month short of the federal eviction moratorium. So that is going to provide even more protection for local renters, especially here in Clark County. And it's also going to make it harder for landlords on the flip side to evict tenants, at least for 2 more months. And you just heard there in Clark County, if you are looking for that CHAP funding, which I know a lot of renters, I've heard from you saying that you are looking for that CHAP funding for months now and just haven't heard back. Go back to the website, update your information, and they are promising to litigate that and get that out as quickly as possible. We're going to have much more on this coming up at 13 Action News Live at 5 and at 6 o'clock, so stay with us.